It's the Security Weekly News, episode 171 of the week of 28 November 2021. Tardigrades, Reaper, HP, Cannazon, Ikea, cameras, the virtual DMV verse, why you shouldn't sell yak fat to children, and Jason Wood on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right, it's Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White. Let's see what happened this week. A new malware called Tardigrade is being used against vaccine makers. Yeah, that's always a smart move. Anyway, nothing new there. I mean, we've seen that before, but this particular malware is kind of interesting, I guess, for a couple of different reasons. The malware, which is being used by they didn't name the APT in the article, so we'll call them, I don't know, the Yak Fat APT. But it was reported by Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center, so that's BioISAC, which I never knew what ISAC stood for, but now you do. But anyway, earlier this year they reported on it, and they initially thought that it was just Cobalt Strike, that it had a new wrapper around it or something. But then a memo from BioISAC in April said that it demonstrated that this malware, Tardigrade, it demonstrated a high degree of autonomy and metamorphic capabilities after it was used against a large biomanufacturing facility. A second facility was hit with the same malware in October. So BioBright, which is a member of the BioISAC, was the one that was doing this analysis, and they said that they did an analysis of it, and they named it Tardigrade, and that it's a variant of smoke loader, and that it has metamorphic capabilities. So what that all means is that metamorphic capabilities is when you have shellcode components that are downloaded from a command and control site, and then it compiles locally. And when it compiles locally, then they can take advantage of whatever kind of system it's compiling on. So it could run on a lot of different kind of systems. It can do different things depending on what kind of system it's on. It can take advantage of different exploits and so on and so forth. This one is able to do that, apparently. It also apparently can do its own lateral movement. So I guess that is a kind of wormable... they didn't describe exactly what that meant, but I guess it's a kind of wormable capability to try to find other accounts and things that it can exploit. Maybe it doesn't have to worm, but it can actually find other accounts. But there was some conjecture. The other interesting thing here was there was some conjecture by other people that this really was just Cobalt Strike. But BioBright then put out another announcement yesterday, and they said they had now second and third-party confirmation that it was not Cobalt Strike. And so there was sort of one of those little slap fights shaping up there. They did issue another warning to vaccine manufacturers saying that threat actors are becoming, this is a quote, threat actors are becoming more focused on trying to cripple critical business sectors, and it is imperative that you do not let your guard down. So sounds bad either way. Reaper is one of the many names of APT-37. Not my favorite one, but Reaper's pretty good. And it is a North Korean state hacking group, allegedly. And they typically in the past have targeted South Korean journalists, defectors, and activists. So this is something that's been going on for a long, long time. For some, Palo Alto had the best name for this APT, which is Free Milk. I really like that one, and I didn't know if it was a call to free milk or it was like you can get milk for free or it means something else. I was going to look it up on Urban Dictionary before the show, decided I am not typing that into Urban Dictionary today. I'll wait till I'm on somebody else's machine, and then I'll type it in. But anyway, I like it, but it's a weird name. Anyway, the typical approach they use are watering hole type attacks with spear phishing and smishing. So usual business for this kind of thing. But they are apparently now using a new malware called Chinotto. Don't know what that means in Italian or Korean or whatever language that's from, but Chinotto, which is able to target Windows and Android devices. Kaspersky was the one that found this particular malware being used in their most recent campaigns. And the Reaper group has been around a long time. So they first were identified in 2012. Chinotto will allow control of compromised device. So they use the phishing, smishing stuff to get on your phone. They use Chinotto on there. It allows them to do screenshot captures, payload deployments, exfiltration. It's a framework, so they can basically do just about anything they want. And then all that uploads back to a command and control server back in Pyongyang or somewhere. Reaper was not immediately deploying this malware, though. And they were compromising the phones with these phishing attacks, and then they were waiting up to 6 months to deliver the malware after the initial compromise of the device. Chinotto is customizable, though. So like a lot of this other framework malware, it can deliver who knows what. So anything and everything can be actually attached to this. They just put it in the directories on the command and control server, and there you go. But it particularly targets credentials on the device, which would allow them then to credential stuff the victim in other venues. So they take the credentials they get off your phone, they use those to credential stuff a machine locally, and since they can infect your laptop and your mobile device at the same time, it would effectively allow them to defeat the two-factor protections that people are using because they can screen capture. This is one of those overlay attack kind of things. They can capture screenshots of the SMS pop-up or other messages that are on the screen, and they can use that to defeat two-factor authentication. So, wow, it's kind of like Pegasus in a way. I mean, it's another one of these kind of particular types of tools. It's not Pegasus, but it's kind of down that road. F-Secure found some vulnerabilities in HP printers that affect at least 150 different multifunction models, going all the way back to 2013. F-Secure said these flaws have likely created a lot of exposures for users that have multifunction printers at home or in the office. These are those particular printers that print, scan, copy, and fax. I mean, they do fax if you have a telephone line. And I actually got somebody recently asked me for a fax, and I was like, really? Are you kidding? I felt like I had dialed like the past. And, I was like, is this AOL or something? But, I really felt like, they were like, and I was like, I didn't know that anybody still uses faxes, and I'm not even sure I can do that. And then I did find you could use the internet to send a fax to the internet, which could then be faxed to them. They only accepted faxes. It was really weird. But I started to ask them if I could send a UUN coded file or something like that, but I didn't. Anyway, one of the vulnerabilities can be exploited with physical access. So you have to actually sit down with a USB stick and plug that into the printer. But if you are able to do that, it can give you full access to the device. So that one, not so much. But the second one is a buffer overflow with a CVSS score of 9.3, and it can be remotely exploited because it has open ports, and it would allow remote code execution on the device. It was also described as a wormable exploit, so they could actually take over your whole network. HP has provided patches for all these affected models. There's a whole long list of them in the article. So if you have an HP printer, you may want to both check this article and see if your printer is affected, and also like my printer has an automatic check to see if there's an update function so that you can update it and get these patches put in place. I once told a friend that I didn't understand how you could send $500 blind to some dark website to buy drugs. And my friend, who is no longer with us, but was very astute in drug culture back in the 70s and stuff, said, if you're used to pulling up to the curb at Lex and 125th Street, and yes, I know that Lex and 125th is a super nice area now, but the Velvet Underground, hey, I'm waiting for my man, $26 in my hand, that kind of thing. Yeah, if you don't know that song, sorry. But anyway, if you pull over to Lex and 125th in 1975 and hand some guy named Bert $500 and hope he doesn't decide to shoot you in the face, so okay, I was like, all right, okay, you win. I was like, you're right. You pull over on a dark street and hand some guy a bunch of money, and yeah, okay, I got it. Anyway, so the whole idea of the dark web being at least maybe no more likely than street side purchases ending up in some kind of elaborate tragedy. So if I do ever decide to order an 8-ball, the dark web it is, since anyway, I don't know anybody named Bert that's selling stuff in New York, but. Anyway, apparently, Cannazon is the largest dark web, and I'm not sure how these stats are assembled. Smuggler Pete's is the largest murder for hire organization in the underground, but don't tell anybody. But anyway, Cannazon is the largest cannabis provider on the dark web, according to this article. The operators of the site said they had suffered a debilitating distributed denial of service attack and a signed message, so it actually had their PGP hash on there, from the market, said they are retiring. And they went on to say that it is most definitely not a rug-pulling scam on the vendors. So I'm like, are they charging the vendors to sell their wares in advance? Like, is this more of this dark web has become so commercial that they have HR departments and things now? And apparently. But anyway, the site was indeed hit with a massive distributed denial of service back in early November. But they did somehow manage to stay afloat and keep the market open. But finally, I guess this just continued into the point where they shut it down. The warning here is beware that new markets are going to spring up using that same name because it's the dark web. There's not any rules. So remember, but I will tell you, if you buy drugs from guys named Bert on 125th and Lex in 1975 or from a dark website, well, it's probably illegal wherever you live, and it's probably a scam, or at least possibly a scam, and apparently illicit drugs sometimes suffer from quality control issues. Imagine that. I haven't bought a lot of drugs, so if all of you are out there screaming at the screen that I don't know what I'm talking about because, I should get real drug users on here, we'll try to get a lineup of serious junkies to be on the show in the next week so that they can explain how this really works. But I will say you have been warned. As payback for all those college nights spent trying to assemble a Hymnus 8-drawer dresser, which was compared to building the 4,000-piece Lego Death Star, and try to get that 2-meter exhaust port in there, baby. Oh, I'm telling you. Ikea, who makes the Hymnus 8-drawer device, issued warnings to its employees that an ongoing attack is using emails from a reply chain to target their corporate inboxes. Now, this type of attack is often really tricky. If you've probably seen these kind of attacks, but if you've not seen them, they often have links that appear in replies to ongoing legitimate exchanges. They often originate from actual corporate servers. They actually may have source addresses that appear to be legitimate as they're sent from compromised accounts and internal email servers and so forth. The attack appears to be spreading Emotet or Qbot, and it is based on a downloaded zip file called charts.zip. So someone probably bought a Nordy bed and ended up sleeping on the floor. And I picked all those because those are supposedly some of the most difficult IKEA pieces to actually assemble. Now, I could not even afford IKEA when I was in college. We built all our furniture out of cinder blocks and abandoned lumber, which sometimes had really funny smells. But I remember my friend laughing that my expensive component stereo was sitting on a really gnarly plank across some old bricks that fell off the neighbor's building. College. Yeah. This other story I had here talks about covering up your laptop camera. Now, all of us have seen this a lot with, it's always one of those DEF CON things. A lot of vendors hand out, the little sliding plastic that you cover your laptop camera with. Now, I'm kind of like the person in the article that said, well, somebody hacking my cam is going to get pretty bored, but I get it. I mean, it's not that hard to hack cams, and well, do you really want somebody trying to target you? I had a call yesterday, just before this show, I was watching the end of another show, and they were talking about, people being able to get or sending you email threats and email blackmail threats and so forth. And I had a call from somebody who said they got notified that somebody had used their desktop camera to film them looking at OnlyFans, and that they wanted, and I was like, well, were you looking at OnlyFans? And the guy was like, oh, it wasn't me, it was a friend. And I was like, was your friend looking at OnlyFans? And he was like, maybe. And I'm like, okay, I guess it could be legit. Was your camera on? Anyway, we all know that that's easy enough to do, and it happens all the time. But that's not really the point of the article. The point is that it's going to get harder and harder to cover all the cams that are going to be around you. I mean, you start thinking just right now, wherever you are, or wherever you walked from, or where you're driving today, you got traffic cams, Ring doorbells. My new garage door opener that I had put in yesterday has a camera on it. Google Glass, my car has so many cameras on it. I don't even know how many cameras it has, but it has cameras in the front, on the sides, on the top, on the back, inside the car. And of course, somebody has access to those cams anyway. Light bulbs, probably I saw a light bulb the other day. It's got a built-in security camera on it, so it looks like a regular light bulb you put in your living room, but it's also got a cam, so you can see what's happening, watch your pets, tear your house to shreds, all that kind of fun stuff. But I mean, pretty soon, I think everything's going to have a camera in it somewhere, and it's going to get more and more difficult to cover all those cameras up. And likewise, a lot of them are cloud-based, so that means they're streaming material into the cloud as you sit there. And so the video is not even under your control necessarily. The Ring doorbell is streaming up to the cloud and so forth and so on. But, so who knows who has access to it? And you're going to have a lot of pieces of cardboard in your backpack if you want to, cover all these things all the time. I really do think a shift in privacy is coming in terms of some of this. I don't know where it was going to go. Like, is it going to become like a big, like a big pushback? Or is it just going to say, people are going to say, forget it? I'm not sure what it is or how it's going to play out, but I do understand that these things can be used against you by the government. Believe me, I'm the original fan of dystopian literature. I was just going through all our old books the other day. I was like, wow, I have a lot of dystopian literature here. But I do think it's coming. So we should probably all start thinking about it in terms of how we're going to deal with it when it does indeed arrive. Now, I don't know about you, but when I wear a thong, and I finish with it, it needs to be cleaned. And as a thong sterilizer to the stars, he has cleaned up some pretty funky scenes. From that thong that Brando wore in Apocalypse Now to Bill Shatner's thong that he wore into space a couple of weeks ago, or even the one that was recovered after they found Lindsay Lohan wandering in the desert. This is the guy that you call for all your thong sterilization needs. He is none other than Jason Wood.
I'm pretty sure that was Aaron, though, that was doing that, not me.
He just
saying.
Aaron just wants to do that.
Hey, everybody. It is good to be back with you. So I was looking around, and I ran into this and just thought, man, no, this would really suck. Can you imagine being in a business that has had some kind of intrusion, and they receive a notice that reads something like this from their cyber insurance company? We regret to inform you that we have denied your claim because the Acme Insurance company has attributed the attack to a nation state or some kind of retaliatory cyber attack by operation by a nation state. And this is excluded from your insurance policy and is not covered by Acme Insurance. Execs' heads would be exploding and stuff like that. Why did they pay all this money for it? But the Register published an article today that actually discusses exactly this type of scenario. Lloyd's of London, rather old, 1686, I believe, insurance company has released some guidance or suggestions to insurance companies recently, basically saying, hey, you should put in exclusions in your cyber insurance for acts of cyber war or any type of retaliatory cyber operation between different nation states. And so this kind of caught my attention. I started digging into it because they're talking about attribution here, and now the insurance companies are getting into the attribution game, it appears like. From what I recall, it's not unusual to see exclusions in insurance policies that will say, we're not going to cover acts of war, because if you're an insurance company that's covering in an area and two armies have been through here doing their thing, you're probably going to be a bankrupt insurance company if you're going to rebuild the area again. And, so they write in exclusions to protect themselves. Sometimes you can go out and you can buy additional policies depending on where you're at, what you're trying to get coverage for, and they're always more expensive. But for things that aren't covered in a basic policy, Homeowners World, for example, doesn't cover flood, but sometimes you can go out and buy flood insurance. It looks like Lloyd's has basically taken the stance of, hey, we've got a problem here with all of these claims in cyber insurance, and we need to limit our losses here. And particularly when we have, everybody's talked about how difficult it is to defend against nation states, I guess. And so Lloyd's has decided we want to protect themselves and are suggesting other insurance companies that they should protect themselves from acts of cyber war, or again, what they call retaliatory cyber operations. So, your country pissed off some other country, and the island of Malta comes back and attacks the United States for something that they didn't like. Now, this is just a suggestion. They don't have this isn't a regulatory control. They can't force insurance companies per se to do this, but it is a very influential suggestion. They're an influential firm. And honestly, it could have some teeth to it because they do sell a lot of reinsurance, which is basically insurance that insurance companies buy to protect themselves against losses that they take on policies. So certainly if Lloyd's put that into their reinsurance policies, then these companies would be likely to put their own exclusions in as well. Here's the language that actually came, that they have put out there that they want to enforce, and they're suggesting other companies look at. And this is a quote: "Pending attribution by the government of the state, including its intelligence and security services, in which the computer system affected by the cyber operation is physically located, the insurer may rely upon an inference which is objectively reasonable as to attribution of the cyber operation to another state or to those acting on its behalf. And it is agreed that during this period, no loss shall be paid," end quote. So what they're basically saying here is that, let's say you've got a server, you've got systems hosted in AWS and it's hosted in Virginia and San Francisco, those regions. And therefore, by that, then, there would be requiring the U.S. government and any intelligence or security services to do attribution, or not require them to do it, but they would be saying, hey, if while we're waiting for the U.S. to do attribution on this intrusion, we're going to go ahead and use our own attribution as long as it is objectively reasonable, and whatever that means. And so this really kind of caught my attention. What on earth is objectively reasonable, for example, and who gets to determine what that is? Where are they getting this information from? I'm assuming that the victim is going to make a claim here. They're going to look at this and they're going to try and find some kind of attribution to see if they can get out of supporting this claim. And they basically, while they're waiting for, in this scenario, the U.S. government to do attribution, which it may or not ever do, they can use their own attribution or from wherever they've got it. And therefore, if somebody comes up and says, yeah, we think that was, Saudi Arabia, then, we don't have to pay on that. Now, I suppose that if this came out, you get a big enough victim, they could lawyer up and turn around and start to contest that and say, wait a minute, we don't think that that's a reasonable attribution. We think it was whatever, type of group or event. And so you need to pay that. And then the courts get involved and they can decide what is reasonable in this case. So that, I don't know, I'm really kind of struggling over that phrase there and how they're going to try and apply that. I'd also, like I said, I'm really interested. What sources are you allowed to use, or does an insurance company decide to use that is going to provide this kind of attribution? Are they just going to look at a major news outlet and say, hey, well, we found 3 stories that said it was the Russians, so, rock on, we're denying your claim? Or do they have, will they do something more formal where they go to some kind of vendor and try and come up with attribution for it? And, what kind of vendor is this? What maturity level do they have in threat intelligence and the ability to do this type of stuff? Because doing attribution is a lot of work. And again, how do you go about appealing this if you disagree with it? One of the things I have noticed, actually, I just recently took some training on this, but also in working at a company that does threat intelligence. Attribution is a long, drawn-out process. If a major intrusion happens, there's always this desire. We want to know who hit us. For whatever reason, even if we can't hit them back, we want to know who got us. Who do we blame for this? And so, when a major intrusion happens, there's no shortage of blog posts, news articles, talking heads on TV, or what have you, discussing who did this and guessing at the attribution with varying levels of certainty. And we certainly talked about stories like that here on the show, where people have made claims of attribution and talked about different threat actors and whatnot. But in reality, if you have an intrusion, only a small group of organizations actually have access to that raw data and are going to be able to really look through it and see what went on there. And all that data is covered by NDAs and attorney-client privilege and stuff like that. And so it never gets released publicly. So any claims as to who did it in the public forum, like a news story or whatnot, I mean, you really need to read that with a critical eye. And even, if for folks that have attribution, I mean, what's their level of confidence in this? To really do attribution, you've got to gather up a lot of intrusion information, across a number of intrusions. And you're spotting different patterns of behaviors and tools and coding patterns and stuff like that, infrastructure, and all that gets grouped together in activity clusters. And there's no attribution with an activity cluster. This is just the name we give it so that, we can know what we're talking about when we get in a meeting. And eventually, you start deriving some hypotheses on that. Well, what do you think? Maybe it was these guys. This fits in with what we know about their interests or whatnot, and that has to be investigated and looked at. And finally, you may start to get some level of attribution after like months, typically, with varying levels of confidence. You'll see statements like, we think this was APT1 with low confidence, or we think it was the REvil. Well, REvil's usually pretty obvious because we get the ransomware, but let's say, the North Koreans with medium confidence or what have you. So, this is not a simple business to get into. And to do, and as people talk about attribution, really doing attribution is difficult, and it's a level of confidence. You don't know for certain. You just get a level of we're pretty sure, or we're not entirely sure, but it's looking like this. Which leads me to another question. Will the insurance companies try to build out their own threat intel teams? How are they? Are they going to want to bring this in-house, or are they just going to source it out to the vendor? I suspect for the most part they'll source it out to a vendor out there. But I could see some really large insurance companies, Lloyd's for example, decide, hey, we want to bring this kind of expertise in-house, which also could give them some influence over the ultimate attribution, which is, maybe not to say that companies would necessarily do that, but does make you wonder a little bit. Our intel team has determined that we think Belgium was behind this because we've heard that they're really into attacking manufacturing companies or something like that. So, and so would they build that? Would they just buy a threat intel company and bring it in? I'm not sure. It could be kind of interesting to see how this develops. Now, I'm sure there are some folks out there who would quickly point out how quickly or how we got attribution for solar winds really fast, and maybe some other intrusion. But that's pretty rare, and those attributions don't go without criticism out there in the public. The only bet I have on this guidance from Lloyd's that if it gets widely adopted, there are going to be lawsuits over it. There's going to be a large victim who's going to be willing to lawyer up and go fight it out with, over this attribution. And, maybe we'll get some answers to some of these questions. More than likely, it's just going to get muddied up. And I honestly, I'm just like, thinking, well, this is going to just be like more business offerings for threat intel for insurance companies and get attribution for the intrusion you're investigating. And so you get ads maybe saying stuff like, are you an insurance company looking for attribution, an attribution assessment on a data breach? Just give us a call. We'll give you the attribution you need today for the low price of $99,995.99. And I'll give it a little jingle behind it like a used car sales shop. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little sarcastic about it, but it's kind of interesting. I think there's a lot of risks here in what they're trying to do. I think Lloyd's is going to run into a number of roadblocks. If you're interested in this, go ahead and check out the link in the show notes. There's a number of links to different stories where they've covered different things at different times, as well as links to some of the guidance from Lloyd's. So go check it out.
Thank you, Jason. I mean, that's from a company that insured Mick Jagger's lips, right? And also Robert Plant's Naughty Bits, I think. And yeah,
they'll insure anything if you're willing to.
Well, yeah, if you'll pay for it, they'll insure whatever you want. But
all right, we'll come up with a risk rating for that and give you a price. And
read the fine print.
Very much so.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. And finally, well, the Metaverse thing is back. all the way from CompuServe to World of Warcraft, Second Life. All these companies have been promising some kind of a vast, elaborate experience that it allows you to interact with other people in a virtual world with real estate and all this stuff. And, and it always ends up the same way with a whole bunch of avatars standing around in a plaza somewhere. I mean, granted, Second Life added all sorts of sex toys and sex shops and so forth. But, virtual sex organs don't really work that well. At least that's what my friend told me. Yeah, you know who you are. But anyway, jumping on the bandwagon now is Seoul, South Korea, with Metaverse Seoul, which will open its virtual doors for business on New Year's Eve this year, sort of. So ever since Gibson wrote Neuromancer and was talking about all that stuff, this has been sort of the promise of the interweb that has never actually been realized. Seoul says that the metaverse they are building won't be done, wait for it, until 2026, which sounds a bit long-lived for current technology. But that's how the government works. They claim it's going to be a full-service virtual world where you can make reservations for city facilities, ride virtual tour buses, visit a virtual mayor. A visit to the virtual DMV. It's probably going to be a lot more exciting than visiting the live DMV, right? Because although you just can't simulate that urine smell accurately. But when they do when they do get this and they say 2026, I thought that's 4 years in the future. So I realize it's government, so they're going to lag behind the real world by a decade or so. But imagine if you took the tech from 6 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever and introduced it today as some kind of super cutting-edge experience. It would be like, are these 16-bit graphics? Like, is that a virtual sex organ in a virtual DMV, or is it like the guy's holding a pin? I'm not exactly sure what that is. But anyway, it seems kind of like a destined-to-fail adventure where the system will be so out of date by the time they actually get it really running that it will be time to try to design the next one. So it'll end up being like the real DMV, only maybe without the urine smell. I do remember I went to the DMV once, and they literally had an average wait time of 4 to 6 hours. And wait for it, the toilets were broken. I was like, you're saying I got to sit here for 6 hours and the toilet is broken? Yeah, no kidding. And you couldn't leave. They said if you left, you lost your spot. If they could have just played some country song on repeat, it would have been a pretty close approximation to my vision of hell. And that's the news. Thanks, Jason. Thanks to all of you. And I will see you Friday on the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up.